Hi everyone, so this turns out to be my third video about little science misconceptions that I used to have. When I was in 4th grade, one time I was sick and I stayed home from school and my mom plugged in this humidifier for me. And I hadn't heard the word humidifier before, but I had heard of a dehumidifier because we had one in the basement. We live in Pittsburgh where the basements can get quite soggy, and we had a grand piano in the basement. We needed a dehumidifier, and it confused the heck out of me why there was a humidifier and a dehumidifier, and I thought they were kind of the same thing, just kind of organized a little bit differently. So that was kind of dumb. Around that same time, when I was in 4th or 5th grade, I used to love to watch the Discovery Channel. There used to be a show called New Detectives, where they would investigate crime scenes, and one time the show talked about the Tylenol cyanide murder. So in 1982, somebody tainted Tylenol with cyanide, and about 7 people died. And I was watching the show, and I noticed that the people in the lab who were investigating the Tylenol pills, they had these huge suits on, they had gloves on, and I thought the reason for that was that cyanide was so toxic that even one molecule of that stuff could kill you. I didn't realize that the suits were on to protect the evidence. I thought it was, oh my god, they were literally protecting themselves from getting hurt from the cyanide. When I was in 6th grade, my 6th grade teacher explained that over the weekend he was cleaning the house and he had accidentally mixed ammonia and bleach. We were learning a little bit about chemical reactions, that's why he explained this, and that it had created a toxic gas, and he had to stay with a neighbor for some time, and he was explaining how two seemingly seemingly safe chemicals can become really dangerous, or vice versa, and so he was explaining about ammonia and bleach, but I had never heard of the word ammonia before, and I thought he had said pneumonia, the illness, and so I interpreted it as you got to understand, English is my second language, so I had a little bit of a hard time interpreting things like that. I interpreted it to mean that he had a family member who was ill with pneumonia and had vomited or maybe had diarrhea, and he had tried to clean it up with bleach and caused a problem with that. It didn't make any sense to me because I didn't understand why he would explain that as mixing, but I thought that was how people explain stuff like that in English. So it was because English was my second language. So a little bit of a hard time understanding that. Funny thing is, a couple days before the incident, I had a classmate who was out of school for pneumonia, so that's why I knew what pneumonia was. I just didn't know what ammonia was. And I wonder if they have similar Latin roots, which is why they sound so similar. Okay, so around that same time, I had another misconception about another chemical. I thought the element mercury came from the planet Mercury. I thought we had to go to Mercury, dig up some stuff, and then purify it, and then put it into our thermometers. I just couldn't come up with any other reason why we would name an element after a planet. I literally thought it came from the planet. Kind of an interesting fact is that even though Mercury doesn't come from Mercury, we actually sent some plutonium to Pluto with the New Horizons mission. They had a power pack which was made of plutonium, which a lot of people are nervous about every time we launch one of these, especially if we don't launch them directly to the planet. Sometimes we need to fly back to Earth to gain velocity, and it gets a lot of people nervous that an accident could happen and that plutonium could burn up in the atmosphere. Fortunately, it hasn't had to happen that way. Okay, so when I was in 6th grade, Concorde had its famous accident, and my 6th grade teacher was explaining about this one day, and the way he described the speed of Concorde is that you would board after eating lunch, and you would arrive in time to eat breakfast on the same day. And I thought he meant that Concorde flew so fast, like close to the speed of light, that it caused you to time travel. I didn't realize what he meant was that you could fly faster than the time zones. I thought you were literally time traveling. That same year, I learned about a little bit more detail about the Apollo 11 mission, and I learned that Apollo 11 traveled at about 25,000 miles an hour. I was trying to wrap my head around the concept of going 25,000 miles an hour. My family and I used to fly to Taiwan regularly, and we would fly on this airline that had a screen that showed you how fast you were flying, altitude, and stuff like that. So I knew an airplane could do 500 miles an hour easily, usually more. And so I was trying to compare Apollo 11 to the speed of an airplane. And I was thinking, okay, 25,000, that's about 50 times faster than the plane we take to Taiwan. And I tried to remember how flying to Taiwan feels, and I know there's always a lot of turbulence. And so in my head, I tried to multiply that turbulence by 50 and to imagine what the crew of Apollo 11 would feel. And so in my head, I imagined all the luggage would fall onto the floor, and you would go to the bathroom, and you couldn't aim for the toilet. It would make a mess. And it was all a misconception, of course, because there's no atmosphere for Apollo 11 to be flying through to cause any turbulence. I had a misconception about how the toilets in the airplane worked. I thought what you flushed down the toilet literally fell back to Earth. And it was fascinating to me because at the time, I didn't have many friends, and I didn't really interact very well with Americans. So every time we would fly over Canada or over Japan, I would flush a piece of paper with my information on it, so hoping people would call or email me. And obviously never happened because it never fell back to Earth in the first place. When I was very young, this was when I was 6 or 7 years old, my family was from Taiwan, and my parents would sometimes call family members in Taiwan. I think they had some family members in Japan as well. And when they would dial the phone, they would dial 0 and then a bunch of codes, obviously. Country code. I didn't understand that. I just knew it started with a 0. I also knew that if they needed to call long distance, we lived in Pittsburgh, if they needed to call family members in California, they would dial a 1 first. So I assumed that 0 meant to call basically halfway around the world. And so I thought the other digits, 2 through 9, were reserved for calling other planets. If you wanted to call Neil Armstrong when he was walking on the moon, you might have dialed a 2 before the number. Or, around the same time, I think we had a few missions to Mars, and I didn't realize there weren't any people in there. I thought if you wanted to talk to an astronaut on Mars, you would dial 3 before the number, and so on and so forth. It just confused the hell out of me why the other digits weren't being used. When I was in 5th grade, right after the year I was in 5th grade, my family and I traveled to Taiwan, and I had such a good time in Taiwan that I wanted to go more regularly. And so I decided to dig a hole in our backyard, hoping to reach Taiwan with the hole. At the time, I knew I could walk or run a mile without a problem. Usually, it would take me about 15 minutes to run a mile. Some of my classmates were doing it in 6 or 7 minutes, but it'd take me 15 minutes. And I thought, hey, maybe if I could dig 1 mile each day, it'd take me about 10 years to reach Taiwan, and then we could regularly go back and forth. And I didn't realize that there was a big difference between walking horizontally for a mile versus digging downward for a mile. Actually, we have much better luck going upward than downward in terms of human exploration. If you think about it, humans have traveled, 250,000 miles in the upward direction, but only a mile in the downward direction to this day. It's even more dramatic for our machines. Our machines have only gone down about 8 miles, but they've gone up, 10 billion miles, and still going, and still communicating with us, Voyager 1. So, that was a big misconception that I had. When I was about 16 or 17 years old, I had never dated at the time, and it was very depressing. When was I going to meet the right person? And I did a little bit of a back-of-the-envelope calculation. I was 16 years old, and I was thinking, if even if I'm expected to meet the right person in the next 10 years, let's say before I'm 26, 10 years, that's only 3,600 days. Every day when I wake up, I'll just give myself a 1 in 3,600 chance that I'll meet the right person today. And I thought that was pretty great, because that's a lot better than winning the lottery, or a lot better than a lot of other things that we would like. And so that kind of helped me go. And I don't know if this counts as a misconception or not, but it was a quick back of the envelope calculation that helped me go in, and so I guess it worked. Thanks for watching.